PMQs Unpacked is coming next here on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley. This is Times Radio. PMQs Unpacked is next. Just go online to the Times Radio YouTube channel. You can watch live as Tim Shipman and I pause the action as Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer clash across the dispatch box. That's coming up in just a moment. First, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. Vladimir Putin says Russia's still open to diplomacy, but will put its national security first. The president's ordered troops into breakaway regions of eastern Ukraine. The UK, US and EU have all announced new sanctions on Russian interests in response. Rescue boats have been launched in Bewdley in Worcestershire, where water's breached temporary flood barriers along the Severn. It's one of two places along the river where danger to life warnings have been issued. A man who stalked British tennis star Emma Raducanu has been handed a 5-year restraining order. 35-year-old Amrit Margar once walked 23 miles to her home, taking her father's shoe as a souvenir. Magistrates heard Margar's campaign left the 19-year-old US Open champion constantly looking over her shoulder. And face coverings will no longer be required on London Underground from tomorrow. Transport for London says customers and staff will be strongly recommended to wear them if they are able to. We'll bring you a full news and sport roundup at 5:30. But now it's time for this.
Order!
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio.
Order. I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
Yes, it's that time of the week where we go live to the House of Commons to pause the action and analyse in real time what's going on. You can watch along right now. I'm just logging on myself. Go to YouTube, type in Times Radio. There we are. And then you click on that. And then you click on that. And there you are. You can see me and a slightly out of breath Tim Shipman.
Well, I thought you were going to give me the time to recover. But,
Well, I won't come to you immediately. Because I'm aware you've literally run up all the way here.
Run up escalators twice.
There we are.
To be here.
Well, I'm glad you've made it. And we'll blame the trains. Mariella also had issues getting here this way. What do we expect to come out at PMQs today? Is it all going to be Russia?
It may not all be, but you would think it was odd if Starmer didn't lead with Russia. Not least because it's a great opportunity for him to show that he's not Jeremy Corbyn and that he basically agrees with the government's approach. But I think the sanctions package that Boris Johnson announced yesterday has given the opposition plenty of scope to attack him from the do more camp, I would think. It's
quite a sweet spot for Keir Starmer in that he can criticise Boris Johnson for not going further. He can attack the Conservatives for taking money from Russian oligarchs and kick Jeremy Corbyn at the same time for his slightly lacklustre response.
All with the flail of one boot.
Exactly right.
But the danger, of course, with something that straightforward is that it looks like an open goal, and if you don't plant the ball in the middle of it, some people on your own side will question that.
Well, before we get to Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson kicking off PMQs today with a short statement on Britain's approach to sanctions. Let's take a listen.
Mr. Speaker, I can announce to the House that in light of the increasingly threatening behaviour from Russia and in line with our previous support, the UK will shortly be providing a further package of military support to Ukraine. Yeah. This will include lethal aid in the form of defensive weapons and non-lethal aid. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in congratulating Team GB's curling teams for winning gold and silver medals at the Winter Olympics. And Mr. Speaker, I know that members across the House will want to offer condolences to the family and friends of our former colleague Sir Richard Shepherd, who sadly died earlier this week. He served as the MP for Aldridge Brownhills for 36 years. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
David Johnson.
OK, let's just pause it there. So we had the sanctions yesterday, military support today.
Yeah, and if you're a cynic, which we both are, you would say that Boris Johnson wanted to get that out at the top, so he's got something to use himself during this session. Labour parties tend to be less enthusiastic about sending lethal aid. Defensive weapons can often be turned around and pointed in an offensive way. And there'll be some on the Labour benches who don't like the sound of that. So it'd be interesting to see how whether Starmer backs that enthusiastically or not, and what effect that has on the people sitting behind him. So it's a clever move by Johnson to announce it at the top, but quite exactly what it means will get scrutinised later.
Because crucially, it's not a member of NATO, Ukraine, so our commitment to sort of boots on the ground is not the same as it might be if it's somewhere else.
No, that's right. And Britain's been trying to take a sort of a leading role in providing what they call lethal aid. Some of the Baltic countries have tried to do so as well. And if you speak to ministers at the moment, you don't have to get very far into your conversation before they start muttering and moaning about the fact that the French and the Germans have not done that. Germany's had quite a bit of grief over the last couple of weeks, the French a bit less so, but I think there's some ministers who think France, as the other major military power in Europe, might put its hand in its pocket and send some weapons to Ukraine as well.
Well, here we go then. This is PMQs Unpacked. You can watch along on the YouTube channel. Stephen is in Taunton. Glenn is in northwest London. Doesn't Matt look relaxed today? I don't know what that means. Someone else is tuning in from Lithuania. Terry in Salford. Somebody's in Romsey, the Cotswolds, Portugal, New York, no less. Welcome aboard, everyone. Go online, let us know where you are listening and watching along. Let's go to the comments. For question 1 from Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join with the comments of the Prime Minister in relation to Sir Richard Shepherd? Mr. Speaker, we all want to deter aggression in Europe. We're not dealing with breakaway republics. Putin is not a peacekeeper. A sovereign nation has been invaded. The Prime Minister promised that in the event of an invasion, he would unleash a full package of sanctions. If not now, then when?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the UK has been out in front in offering military support to Ukraine, and I'm grateful for what he said yesterday about the need to make sure that we keep ammunition in reserve for what could be a protracted struggle over this issue. But there has been in no doubt about the extent of the package that was already been set out yesterday and what we are already doing. Because, Mr. Speaker, I don't think people quite realise that the UK is out in front. We've sanctioned 275 individuals already. Yesterday we announced measures that place banks worth £37 billion, under sanctions in addition to more oligarchs. And, Mr. Speaker, there is more to come. And we will be stopping Russia. We will be stopping Russia from raising sovereign debt, stopping Russian companies from raising money, and stopping Russian companies, as I said yesterday, even clearing in sterling and dollars on international markets, Mr. Speaker. That will hit Putin where it hurts, but it is absolutely vital that after this first barrage, we work in lockstep with friends and allies around the world. And we squeeze him simultaneously. We squeeze him simultaneously in London, in Paris, in New York at the same time. Unity, Mr. Speaker, is absolutely vital.
OK, let's pause it there. A lot of words from Boris Johnson, a lot of detail on what it might be. And it seems, Tim Shipman, there's a reasonable criticism that if you basically put everyone on warning, on watch, that we might come after you soon, that gives them a chance to get their assets, their money out of the UK.
Yes, clearly. And once again, I think what surprised a lot of MPs, including a lot of Tories yesterday, was that once again Boris Johnson's aggressive rhetoric was not matched by the substance. But then, there was a defence there, which is something that Labour often demands, working with allies, and he's making the point that we need to move in concert with the US and the EU, and clearly the EU in all these matters is often the sheet anchor on moving quickly because they've got a lot of interests with the Russians. But you're right, people will be sceptical about this, and people said if a toe crossed the border, then they'd get hit hard. And instead, one of the analysts at one of the think tanks compared this to tickling Putin's toes yesterday. Clearly there's more coming. But, Boris Johnson talks about those banks and about those individuals who've been sanctioned. I read some stuff yesterday suggesting that some of the people we sanctioned yesterday, the Americans had sanctioned in 2018.
Yeah.
So we've merely caught up with them.
It doesn't seem like we're moving together. We're just, catching up in some parts. We should also point out, you heard both Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer paying tribute to Sir Richard Shepherd. He was a Conservative MP from 1979 to 2015, and we heard, we got the news yesterday that sadly he had died at the age of 79. Just that was who they were referring to. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons then. Question number 2 from Keir Starmer.
I hear what the Prime Minister says about sequencing and about further sanctions. But there's already been an invasion. And there's clearly concern across the House that his strategy, I accept unintentionally, could send the wrong message. So if the Prime Minister now brings forward his full package of sanctions, excluding Russia from financial mechanisms like SWIFT and a ban on trading in Russian sovereign debt, he will have the full support of the House. Will he do so?
I'm grateful. Mr. Speaker, I think yesterday, and I'm grateful, by the way, for the general support that the opposition have given, not just to our economic sanctions, but also to the package of military support, which will, as I've said, intensify. What we want to see, Mr. Speaker, is de-escalation by Vladimir Putin. There's still hope that he will see sense, but we are ready very rapidly to escalate our sanctions as I have set out. And under the measures that this House has already approved, and that we can now target, Mr. Speaker, any Russian entity, any Russian individual. We can already target not just the breakaway republics, the so-called breakaway republics in the Oblast of Donetsk and Lugansk. We can target members of the Duma who voted to recognise them. This is the most far-reaching piece of legislation of its kind, and I'm glad that it has his support.
Keir Starmer.
That was a sort of repeat of the first exchange, really. The Keir Starmer is clearly trying to show support, but asking the fundamental question, as he did in the first time, if not now, then when?
Yes, and moving on to some slightly more tricky subjects, like the one thing that people say that they think would really have an effect is to kick Russia out of this SWIFT system, which is a slightly obscure thing that is effectively the sort of the veins and arteries of the financial system in the world. And if you kick them out of it, it's very difficult for them to do financial transactions anywhere. I think there's some disagreement both here and between allies about whether that's a step too far. I think some of those European countries are reluctant to see that. But, Starmer pushing things a bit further. And interesting, though, from Boris Johnson as well, wasn't it? He spends a lot of time having a pop at Starmer and accusing him of sort of being opportunist and Captain Hindsight and all the rest of it, but making a point of saying thanks for your general support. One wonders if at some point we'll get to your general support is not general enough.
General support slightly more senior than Captain Hindsight, I think.
Yes, indeed. Several ranks above.
Several ranks above. But there does seem to be this fundamental question of what is the purpose of these sanctions, to just punish Putin for what he is doing, or is it with the hope of getting him to step back from the brink? And it strikes me that it might be a triumph of hope over anything else, that they think that Putin might, having now embarked on this, now step back.
Yeah, I think, it's sort of odd, because on the one hand you have Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, on the radio this morning saying she's convinced that Putin is hell-bent on invading. Well, why aren't we seeking to deter with a bigger stick in that case? Others say, well, look, we need to calibrate this, and if he does invade fully, then we do. If you've got nothing left in your locker at that point, then you can't sort of add to the punishment. People who understand Putin and say the only language he understands is force is, they'd be hard pushed to say that he's had enough pain yet.
To point out, Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, has been caught with some unguarded comments. He was chatting with serving military personnel at the Horse Guards building in Westminster. He's a former member of the Scots Guards, of course. He said it's going to be a busy army. Unfortunately, we've got a busy adversary now in Putin, who's gone full Tonto. He said the UK has 1,000 personnel on standby to respond to the crisis, adding the Scots Guards kicked the backside of Tsar Nicholas I in 1853 in Crimea, We can always do it again. Tsar Nicholas I made the same mistake Putin did. He had no friends or alliances. And he apparently also described Putin as being in an illogical and irrational frame of mind. So that's clearly what, some unguarded comments, Ben Wallace.
Well, a lot of Ben Wallace's unguarded comments are often on the record as well.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
These may well be genuinely unguarded comments, but they certainly contribute to the picture that he's been trying to paint.
Yeah, exactly right. Right, let's go back to question number 3 then from Keir Starmer.
It does have my support, and if it's used, we will support it. We must also do more to defeat Putin's campaign of lies and disinformation. Russia Today is his personal propaganda tool. I can see no reason why it should be allowed to continue to broadcast in this country. So will the Prime Minister now ask Ofcom to review its licence?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, has already asked Ofcom to review that matter. But what I will say, Mr. Speaker, is that we live in a democracy, Mr. Speaker, and we live in a country that believes in free speech. And I think it's important that we should leave it up to Ofcom rather than to politicians to decide which media organisations to ban. That's what Russia does.
Keir Starmer.
Well, that's a bit of interesting development. Boris Johnson's asked the Dean Doris, the Culture Secretary, to review the operation of Russia Today in the UK.
Yeah, and again, a significant one for Starmer, because Russia Today was a channel on which Jeremy Corbyn and some of his closest friends used to like to go and spread their foreign policy views. So that's quite a symbolic moment. And Starmer's been banging away about Russia Today for a day or two. But interesting that Johnson, whose instincts are fairly libertarian, is sort of uncomfortable with the government intervening in that way. Some people at the BBC might think that Tory ministers might show themselves more reluctant to criticise the BBC's coverage sometimes, if they were genuinely of that view.
The history of Russia Today is fascinating. Boris Johnson, back in, when was this? This was 2017, when he was Foreign Secretary, criticised Russia Today. So it was an absolute scandal that Labour MPs were continuing to appear on it. To validate and legitimate that kind of propaganda by going on Russia Today. But that was just after his own father, Stanley, I think, had also appered on it. So various people have...
making what can only be described as unguarded comments, I presume.
Unguarded comments. I think he was also promoting a novel. But there we are. The fact that, as we discussed, Keir Starmer managing to sort of have a... Basically, that's a bit of a that's a win for Keir Starmer. He's been banging on about Russia Today. Boris Johnson's now done something about it, and he's managed to needle, Jeremy Corbyn in the process.
Yeah.
Right, very good. Question number 4 then, Keir Starmer.
The request was for a review, and I'm very glad to hear that review is now happening. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to be deflected from the unity that this House needs just at the moment. At the weekend, the Prime Minister said that if Russia invades Ukraine, he will open up the Matryoshka dolls of Russian-owned companies and Russian-owned entities to find the ultimate beneficiaries within. Well, Russia has invaded, and it's time to act. If the Prime Minister brings forward the required legislation to do this, he will have Labour's support. So will he commit to do so in the coming days?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are, as I said, bringing forward in the next wave of sanctions measures that will stop all Russian banks, all oligarchs, all Russian individuals raising money on London markets, and we are also accelerating, Mr. Speaker, the economic crime bill, which will enable us in the UK to peel back in the next session, Mr. Speaker, to peel back the facade of beneficial ownership of property in the UK and of companies. It's gone on for far too long. We are going to tackle it under this government, Mr. Speaker. But on all these measures, I think it is very, very important that the House remembers they are more effective when all financial centres move forward together. And that is what the UK has been organising.
Keir Starmer.
But so much the same as answers we probably got to questions 1 and 2. But this plan to ban all Russian banks, all oligarchs from raising money on London markets, that is quite a big deal, isn't it?
Well, it would be a big deal, yes.
If were it to happen.
Were it to happen. You wonder whether that's Boris Johnson using a little artistic licence. I mean, speaking to ministers, it's quite difficult to define who are good oligarchs and who are bad oligarchs. And if you start banning any oligarch who happens to live here from raising money, they'll say that, well, we're a persecuted person who fled Vladimir Putin.
Yes, so there are some people...
Some of those people who give money to the Conservative Party say that they are... they've fled Putin's terror to come and live in Britain.
And the reason they're here is because they aren't safe in Russia and that they brought their money here and that's why they want to invest it and all of that, which is very
some of those people are not believed. But at the same time, it's quite difficult to draw up rules that catch, he's effectively saying, he's promising to catch everybody there. That seems a little optimistic. And again, on the timing of, this beneficial ownership of companies stuff, which is about working out who is really hiding behind multiple front companies. They're talking about the next session of Parliament, which isn't going to be till later this year at the earliest, and by the time the legislation's in place, you're presumably talking well into next year. So that again is not sort of the immediate.
It's not address what's happening right now. Yeah, we go back to the House of Commons. Question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I think I heard the Prime Minister say that the economic crime bill will be in the next session. I hope I misheard that. But I can assure him, if he brings it forward in this session in coming days, it will have our support. There's no reason to delay this. Let me also turn to the elections bill. As it stands, the bill would allow unfettered donations from overseas to be made to UK political parties from shell companies and individuals with no connections to the UK. Labour has proposed amendments that protect our democracy from the flood of foreign money drowning our politics. We can all now see how serious this is. So will the Prime Minister now change course and support these measures in the House of Lords?
Mr. Speaker, we have very tough laws, tough rules in this country to stop foreign donations. We don't accept foreign donations. You have to be on the register of the UK electoral register to give to a UK political party. And before he starts chucking it around, Mr. Speaker, I just remind him the largest single corporate donation to the Labour Party came from a member of the Chinese Communist Party.
I mean, it's not a bad comeback, is it?
No, it's a good comeback. Though, interestingly, Starmer was the one in the previous round saying, "I do not wish to shatter the the unity of the House," and Boris Johnson has finally had enough, and he's
the Chinese donor. We should point out there was money to the to Barry Gardner, but she also gave money to Conservatives.
Yeah, she did. She seems to have favoured Barry Gardner with quite a lot of money, something that perplexes his colleagues, I think it's fair to say.
I think that is probably fair to say. I mean, the issue of Russian money and the Conservative Party comes up all the time. It's one of the things people keep messaging and tweeting and how serious an issue is it, do you think, for the Conservative Party?
Well, it's becoming quite a problem, isn't it? Because it's one of those things that's quite complicated for the reasons I was saying a moment ago, but it's cuts through to the public and they can smell that it feels a bit dodgy. And even if, all of these people are exemplary people who've fled Vladimir Putin and his tyranny, it doesn't look terribly good in the current context, and particularly when the Prime Minister is, throwing around a lot of words about cracking down on all this. Well, these things can begin at home, can't they?
And especially we had a separate development this week, but the Electoral Commission wrote to Michael Gove saying they weren't happy with the elections bill that was going through Parliament because it gave ministers the opportunity to interfere in the way that the elections watchdog operated. Interesting point that's been made on Twitter from Alex about the Russia Today, the idea of reviewing Russia Today operating in the UK. Alex says, stripping RT of its broadcasting licence in the UK would be a mistake. Almost certainly the immediate response from Russia would be to throw out the BBC. That would be a huge blow, not worth it for the limited impact RT has in the UK. I suspect there are far more viewers watching them discussing Russia Today in the Commons than there are people actually watching Russia Today. But anyway, there we go. Let's go back for the last question from Keir Starmer on PMQs Unpacked. Let us know what you think of it so far on the YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search Times Radio. You can see Tim and I in all our glory as we watch the last question from Keir Starmer.
No, Mr. Speaker. At this moment, as the House agreed yesterday, we have to stand united. And I am not going to be deflected from it. I note the Prime Minister did not agree to change the elections bill. I think that's a mistake, and I ask him to take it away and look at it again, those amendments in the Lords. Putin has invaded a sovereign European nation. He is attacked because he fears openness and democracy, and because he knows that, given a choice, people will not choose to live under erratic, violent rule. He seeks division. We must stay united. He hopes for inaction, so we must take a stand. He believes that we're too corrupted to do the right thing, so we must prove him wrong. And I believe that we can. So will the Prime Minister work across the House to ensure that this is the end of the era of oligarch impunity by saying that this House and this country will no longer be homes for their loot?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think any government could conceivably be doing more to root out corrupt Russian money, and that is what we are going to do. And I think we can be proud of what we've already done and of the measures that we have set up. And Mr. Speaker, I'm genuinely grateful for the tone of his last question and for the support he has given. And he is right that it is absolutely vital that we in the UK should stand united. And people around the world can see that the UK was the first to call out what President Putin was doing in Ukraine. We've been instrumental in bringing the world together, the Western world together in lockstep to deal with the problem, to bring together the economic package of sanctions that I have set out. And Mr. Speaker, there is still time for President Putin, as I've said, to de-escalate. But what is at stake, being absolutely no doubt, is not just the democracy of Ukraine, but the principle of democracy around the world. And that is why the unity of this House is so important today, and it is absolutely vital that the United Kingdom stands together against aggression in Ukraine. And I am grateful for the broad support that we've had today from the Leader of the Opposition.
Well, there we are. That brings us to the end of the main exchanges. Quite a mixed view on the YouTube channel. Glenn says Keir Starmer's gone from Captain Hindsight to Captain Irrelevance. Then H says the man who aspires to be Churchill sounding more like Chamberlain. Starmer is utterly fake, says someone else. Boris, go have another party. Tim says, actually, I think Starmer's doing quite well. And then Pat says Starmer is a decent, morally sound leader compared to Johnson. He is outstanding. What's your take, Tim Shipman?
Well, I think, at the end it was sort of, and we all lived happily ever after, which is not necessarily how you want PMQs to end if you like the barbarian bear pit as I do. No, I think that was a perfectly good professional job by Starmer. I doubt people are going to be yelling, what do we want? The end of the era of oligarch impunity. When do we want it? Yesterday. But it was
within this parliamentary session, I think.
Yes, quite. Before the Queen's speech. And Johnson sort of managed to sound vaguely statesmanlike at the end there. Starmer had a decent outing. Johnson had a couple of good bashes back and got across the view that, he wants to move with allies. But it's not going to change the price of fish in Doncaster, is it?
One of the things that I sort of expected Keir Starmer to do was maybe essentially he could have boiled those 6 questions maybe down to 3, and then maybe got on to sort of the real world aspect of it. Boris Johnson said yesterday there was a risk the Russian invasion of Ukraine would lead to a spike in energy bills and petrol prices, and I just wondered whether trying to reflect back on the impact of this on the cost of living might have been part of. And I suppose it doesn't totally fit with Keir Starmer's. We're all
I think that's probably what they decided. I think they probably thought about that. They could have done, was it a more combative session? They could have done some cost of living stuff. They could equally have gone a bit poppier by talking about whether the Champions League final should be in St. Petersburg and try and get the government on the record on that. But I think what Starmer wanted out of this was that message that he twice came out with, which is that we are essentially standing behind you. He doesn't want any excuse for the government to say that the Labour Party is back to its old Corbynite ways. And strategically, I think that was probably the right decision. It might have made for a slightly less exciting tactical PMQs today, but the message that will go out is one that is strategically useful for Labour, and if that cuts through with the public that they're being sort of broadly supportive about standing up to Russia, and it's hard to sort of overestimate what a change the Corbyn lot were on that front. Literally standing there briefing journalists that we should send Novichok to Mr. Putin to see if it was his or not, and it was just absolutely bizarre. And you see it all over Twitter in the last 48 hours, people who genuinely have not a good word to say about the West, about NATO, who are desperate for everybody just to cave in and let Vladimir Putin do what he wants. And these people, came within a few thousand votes of running this country. It's pretty astonishing, really.
The other thing we should point out from PMQs is slightly unusual. We actually got a fair amount of news. Boris Johnson announcing that Britain was drawing up a further package of military support for the Ukraine. He then announced that Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, has asked Ofcom to review the operation of Russia Today in the UK. And there is more work being done to try and stop all Russian banks and all oligarchs from raising money on London markets, although when that will actually come was slightly less clear. That brings us to the end of PMQ's Unpacked. We will do the best of the rest next. If you want to ask Tim and I a question, you can go online now and do it in the comments, if you like, on the YouTube channel. Ask us anything you like. We'll just ignore them if they're particularly stupid. We will do that while we get a news update from Nick Ellaby.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Matt, thank you. Good afternoon. Boris Johnson has said UK military support to Ukraine will intensify. Here's what he promised at PMQs just now.
A further package of military support to Ukraine. Yeah. This will include lethal aid in the form of defensive weapons and non-lethal aid.
It comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's still open to diplomacy but will put its national security first over the Ukraine crisis. He's ordered troops into breakaway regions in the east of the country. The UK, US and EU have all announced new sanctions on Russian interests in response. The Prime Minister's also promising there's more to come, which he says will hit Vladimir Putin where it hurts. The Prime Minister also told the Commons the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries has asked regulator Ofcom to review the operation of the Kremlin-backed Russia Today news channel, but he doesn't want to see politicians making those decisions.
We live in a democracy, Mr. Speaker, and we live in a country that believes in free speech. And I think it's important that we should leave it up to Ofcom rather than to politicians to decide which media organisations to ban. That's what Russia does.
In other news, a man who walked 23 miles to Emma Raducanu's home has been handed a 5-year restraining order. 35-year-old Amrit Magar from Harrow in northwest London was found guilty of stalking the 19-year-old British tennis player at the end of last year. Water levels from the River Severn are peaking in Bewdley in Worcestershire, where temporary flood barriers have already been breached. Rescue lifeboats can be seen in the area where severe danger to life warning remains in place. And anyone using public transport in London won't have to wear face masks from tomorrow. It follows a shift in the government's approach and decreasing infection rates in the city. Sunny spells and the odd shower across the south. Further north, turning increasingly wet and windy as a band of rain and snow with the risk of thunder pushes southward. And Toby Gillies has the sport.
The Foreign Secretary says she'd want English clubs who reach the Champions League final to boycott it if the sport's European governing body UEFA doesn't remove it from Russia. European football's showpiece match is currently due to be held in St. Petersburg, but could be moved over Russia's aggression towards Ukraine. The government has repeatedly called on UEFA to take the honour from them over the last 24 hours, something Liz Truss repeated on Times Radio this morning.
Russia has denied the existence of another sovereign state. It is preparing for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It's been roundly condemned by the international community. I think it would be completely wrong for a football tournament to take place there.
Six-time major champion Phil Mickelson insists his link with the Saudi-backed Super League of Golf was done to make the game better, despite having now apologised for doing it. He's to take a break from the sport after admitting comments he made about it were reckless. Mickelson originally described the Saudis as scary people to get involved with, but insisted it was worth taking their money, so the players had leverage over the PGA Tour. It's understood Wales coach Wayne Pivac will leave wing Lewis Rees-Zammit out for Saturday's Rugby Union Six Nations clash with England. The huge decision means the exciting 21-year-old will go back to club Leicester, with fit again Josh Adams taking his place. And men's tennis world number 3 has been kicked out of a tournament in Mexico after repeatedly smashing his racket on the umpire's chair. Alexander Zverev did it at the end of a doubles match he lost in Acapulco. Tournament organisers say he was withdrawn because of what they call unsportsmanlike conduct. Exclusive Premier League action on TalkSport tonight as Burnley host Tottenham. If you prefer the Champions League, though, there's Manchester United's trip to Atletico Madrid on TalkSport 2.
This is Times Radio.
When you're ready to start planning your next holiday, come and talk with the luxury tailor-made travel experts at Kuoni. Discover why we're a Which recommended provider and offer exceptional flexibility on all holidays. For total peace of mind, trust Kuoni. Atoll protected and Which recommended. Visit kuoni.co.uk or your local store.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker. Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
Very good afternoon to you. We've just done PMQs Unpacked. Your questions that you've been sending in. Tim, this is from Patricia, can journalists become members of the various MPs' WhatsApp groups?
No, but if you have enough friendly journalists, you can get a pretty decent running commentary of what's being
Friendly
said.
MPs. They will link them out. That's good. Somebody else says, have you had any WhatsApps during PMQs, Tim, today?
No, it's been pretty quiet today, actually.
Glenn says, Matt, do you think the Ukrainian crisis will bury Partygate? I suppose it depends slightly on the timing now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a degree it already has, in that we've moved on mentally. The big question will be, does Boris Johnson do anything during this crisis to change people's views of him if, Partygate comes back in a damaging way? I think my personal view is that a lot of MPs have found reasons to not put in their letters against Boris Johnson, and him being a sort of national leader in a time of war will only assist him in that process.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And Jay now says, does Matt prefer tea or coffee? Tea. That's the answer. Right, let's go back to the best of the rest from the House of Commons. We listen to the rubbish questions so that you don't have to. And we kick off, as ever, with the SNP Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, who asked Boris Johnson about a meeting they had about Russian money in 2017.
Mr. Speaker, that meeting was 5 years ago, and I offered to work with the Prime Minister 5 years ago, and nothing has happened. The truth is that Russian oligarchs who give the right people in power a golden handshake have been welcomed into London for years. Their activities weren't stopped, they were encouraged. And plenty of these golden handshakes just so happened to find their way into the coffers of the Conservative Party. Mr. Speaker, £2.3 million, in fact, since the Prime Minister took office. A leading American think tank has publicly raised concerns, and I quote, about the close ties between Russian money and the United Kingdom's ruling Conservative Party are a block to stronger sanctions. How can our allies trust this Prime Minister to clean up dirty Russian money in the UK when he won't even clean up his own political party? Will he finally commit to giving up the £2.3 million his party has raised in from Russian oligarchs?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I just think it's very important for the House to understand we do not raise money from Russian oligarchs. People who give money to this. We raise money from people who are registered to vote on the UK Register of Interest, and that is how we do it, Mr. Speaker. And I think his indignation is, I'm afraid, a bit much, coming from somebody whose very own Alex Salmond is a leading presenter on, as far as I know, on Russia Today, which the leader of the opposition has just called on this country to ban.
Nadine Dorris, the Culture Secretary, really enjoying that, sitting behind Boris Johnson, saying yes.
Animated, I So he was in the SNP when he first started.
When he started doing that, and he was Alba is now set up.
Yes.
But he's still doing his chat show on Russia Today. which has been branded an international embarrassment.
You've got to admire Blackford, though, haven't you, trying to get the Prime Minister to remember a meeting that they held in 2017 when the Prime Minister's shown every evidence of not being able to remember social gatherings.
Well, maybe he needs to send him
in just the last few months.
He needs to send him a questionnaire with a caution attached. Right, let's another. This is another feisty moment in the House of Commons. Join PMQs. This is the Green MP Caroline Lucas.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday when I asked the Prime Minister about Russian meddling in UK elections, he looked very shifty before claiming he wasn't aware of any. Yet, when he was Foreign Secretary in 2017, in a joint press conference with the Russian Foreign Minister, when Lavrov claimed there was no evidence that Russia had interfered in UK elections in any way, the now Prime Minister corrected him by saying there was no evidence of successful interference. So can the Prime Minister tell us what evidence he has seen of unsuccessful interference? Has he actually read the Russia report, which is very clear that there is credible evidence of interference? And given that, as his Defence Secretary said earlier this week, information is as powerful as any tank, can he explain why he's turning a blind eye to allegations of Russian disruption and playing fast?
Order. I hope you're coming to the end of the question. I do need to...
Speaker, I could be a lot faster if I wasn't being barracked by the side opposite.
I think the challenge is that I do want to get the front benches moving quickly. We want to get speed into it, so I'm sure it's the end now.
Given that, as his Defence Secretary said earlier this week, that information is as powerful as any tank, can he explain why he is turning a blind eye to allegations of Russian disruption? Why is he playing fast and loose with our national security?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I repeat what I told her ages ago, if I think I've got it right. I've seen absolutely no evidence of successful Russian interference in any of our any electoral event, Mr. Speaker.
Gareth Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. An extraordinary bit of that, actually, was Lindsay Hoyle letting that noise go on. Given how he intervenes if people start shouting at Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer across the dispatch box, you'd have thought you might have come to Caroline Lucas's rescue a bit quicker.
A little bit quicker. She seemed to do all right.
Well, as somebody said, Caroline's eating her greens, which I think is probably one way of putting it.
I think they had chili pepper on them.
Yeah, this Russian interference in elections, it's something which is alleged a lot.
Yeah, and this obviously goes back to the EU referendum, and some people are convinced that Russian money influenced the result. Clearly, most of the Conservative Party, the Brexiteers, do not think that. And Caroline Lucas was one of those people who was very vocally on the Remain side. She asked a question about, well, you said successful or unsuccessful, and Boris Johnson just repeats what he said before. It wasn't a terribly illuminating moment, really. Clearly, there were attempts to influence. Most people who are less sort of in the tank for the Brexit cause in government tell me that they don't think there was any meaningful interference. And if you think that's why we voted for Brexit, then fine. But I don't think...
might be overlooking some other important issues.
Well, there seem to have been some other long-term trends and information in the campaign that had an effect from some.
It's also slightly more comforting if you still cannot understand why
people voted
why
Brexit.
you lost.
Yeah. The idea that it's everyone was
it must be a conspiracy.
Yes,
peddled by Russia. Well, there we are. We will see how it all pans out. There's one more vote on the on YouTube that's happening right now. Should Boris send British troops to Ukraine? 23% say yes, 77% say no. It's just a bit of fun. It's not representative. Don't complain to me. Right, thank you very much for that. That's Tim Shipman, Chief Political Commentator for the Sunday Times. Thank you for taking us through PMQs Unpacked. You can catch it up if you've just joined us. You can catch it again later on the Times Red Box podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, or watch it all back if that's your sort of thing you like to do on the Times Radio YouTube channel too. And we'll be back same time next week from 12 o'clock. Right, still to come, we are going to tell you about a very exciting new documentary which starts here on Times Radio on Friday. And we'll do the quiz. We'll do that next on Times Radio.
Wake up to Britain's brightest early breakfast with Callum MacDonald on Times Radio with Nutmeg, the digital wealth manager. Thought-provoking analysis, insight and debate as the day's biggest stories break. Plus, get all the latest economic and financial news expertly unpacked in the dedicated Daily Business Bulletin. Early